السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. نحمده ونصلي على رسول النبي الكريم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. قال الله تعالى في شان حبيبي إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه على سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم عليه صلاة وسلاما عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله. Today is the 8th of Safar. And as we've been talking for the last few weeks about Karbala. And, again, there's so many aspects to it. We just kind of hit certain points and then move on. Because one is, in order to really start understanding it, you have to have more of a background for it. Of course, people, they keep asking, why do you keep talking about this? It happened then, and, it's over with, and, we continue on. Which, true sorrow for a lover, sorrow never ends. Anyone who's lost a loved one, who's very close, can testify to this, that the sorrow, it never ends. You learn to deal with it, life goes on, but the sorrow never goes away. And then some people, and it's interesting, these arguments only come when we're talking about Ahlul Bayt and when we're talking about Imam Hussein alayhi salam. That, in Islam, the mourning period is 3 days. Except, of course, for the wife whose husband passes away, then that can be much longer. But we look at, Rasulullah sallallahu himself. We know, and we talked about this, in the Battle of Uhud, the uncle, the beloved uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Hamza radiallahu anhu, is martyred. And the person that initiated this attack on his uncle was the wife of Abu Sufyan, Hinda. Because her father and uncle and brother were killed in Badr, and she wanted, revenge. And so she hires Wahshi. Wahshi was an Abyssinian slave, very, very good with the short spear. He was well known throughout the area for his skills with the short spear. And so she comes to him and she says, I will buy your freedom. I will, give you your weight in silver, your length in silk, and all of these promises that she makes to him. If you kill one of 3, either kill Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or Hamza, or Ali. And Washi, he said, look, there's no way I can even get close enough to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to do anything. And Ali radiallahu anhu is always so aware of his surroundings when he fights, it will be pointless to attack him. Hamza radiallahu anhu is so focused when he attacks. Him I will try. He had no qualms with the Muslims. He just wanted his freedom. So he comes into the battle, He waits for his opportunity. He throws his short spear. Hamza radiallahu is martyred. And he leaves the battlefield. Wahshi leaves the battlefield. So this is the third year of Hijrah. 5 years later, when Mecca falls, Hinda accepts Islam. And when she comes and she accepts Islam, Rasulullah ﷺ says to her that your Islam is accepted, your Iman is accepted, but don't come in front of me. Because whenever you come, I remember my uncle. It's been 5 years. Wahshi had a price on his head. You know, when the Muslims came into Mecca, the order was certain people kill on sight. Wahshi was one of them. He ran off to Taif. Later, Rasulullah ﷺ sends him a message about accepting Islam. Long story short, eventually he makes his way to Medina Munawwara. And he comes before Rasulullah ﷺ, and all of the companions pull out their swords. Rasulullah ﷺ tells them, stop. He accepts Islam. And then Rasulullah ﷺ tells him, tell me how you killed my uncle. And he recounts the whole incident. And as he's telling this, tears are running down everyone's face, including Rasulullah ﷺ. And then he tells Wahshi the same thing. And Wahshi, of course, is radiallahu anhu. He says, your Islam is accepted, but don't come in front of me anymore. And then he tells him, he says, now go do something good in place of what you did before. And so in the Battle of Yamama, using that same spear, Wahshi is the one who kills Musaylima. And he says later on, he says, before my Islam I killed the best of men, and after my Islam I have killed the worst of men. But as long as Rasulullah ﷺ was there, he never came in front of him. Again, this is sorrow. And this was a sorrow for his uncle. What about the sorrow for the grandson? Everybody knows, yeah, you love all your relatives, but you don't love them all equally. And the love for your child is not the same as the love for your uncle. And the love for your grandchild, in many cases, is even more than the love for your own child. And we spoke about this, that night we had our program. When Jibreel al-Islam and the angel of rain came to discuss this issue of what was going to happen. And Imam Hussein al-Islam came into the room, was in front of them as the conversation is going on, listening to the conversation. And Rasulullah ﷺ is crying as they're telling him what is going to happen to his grandson. I alluded to this before, but I never went into it. Why the angel of rain? This is an angel who had never come on the surface of the earth before. Why now? There has to be some reason. And the reason is simple. They knew how Imam Hussein al-Islam would be martyred, because they're telling him. Of course, he knew. But they also knew that the water would be cut off. For 3 days, they would not be allowed to get any water. Now, the army of Yazid, you could say, yeah, they had control of the Euphrates. But the army of Yazid didn't have control over the clouds. And so this is why the angel of rain is coming. He's saying, Ya Rasulullah, this is the will of Allah. Otherwise, we would have sent a flood. And if Imam Hussein al-Islam had wanted, water could have been coming out of the ground. The rubbing of the heels of Ismail al-Islam brings us Zamzam. Many of us don't know, but when the grandfather of Rasulullah ﷺ redug the well of Zamzam, and then the Quraysh disputed him over it. So on the way to arbitration, they got lost in the desert. Water ran out. And most of them said, well, let's just dig our graves and we'll just die here. And Hazrat Abdul Muttalib said, no, I'm not going to do that. He got on his camel, and as soon as he got on his camel stood up, water gushed out from beneath the foot of the camel. If Imam Hussein al-Islam had wanted, water would have come from the skies and the earth. But that was not his purpose. يا أيها الذين آمنوا استعينوا بالصبر والصلاة إن الله مع الصابرين. O you who believe, seek help through patience and salat. And Allah is with those who are patient. He was giving us a new example of patience. He was setting the bar, the example of patience at such a level. We can never attain that level. But if you never aim high, you're not going to get anywhere. This is why in life you should always aim high. That way, when you fall short, at least you got somewhere. You look at Imam Hussein al-Islam and all of those with them, and as each one of them is being martyred. Initially, those of his friends that went out, and this is after Imam Hussein al-Islam has gone to them and told the enemy who he is, to make sure that no one on the day of judgment can say, "Oh, we didn't know." And they're knowingly killing each one of them. None of them complained. The night before he had given them the opportunity, he said, look, they're thirsty for my blood. Nothing will quench their thirst except my blood. So I am happy with you all. You can go. All of them said that none of us are going. Because tomorrow on the day of judgment, if Rasulullah ﷺ asks us that when my grandson was in need, what did you do? What face will we show him? People lose faith for trivial things. You know, here again, you know, this standard of faith that is being exemplified. And none of it was for their own good. You know, as far as, you know, you think, oh, they're going to gain something from a worldly standpoint. So when we look at, you know, what they went through, and again, the trials for the women of the household, Imam Zain al-Abidin, didn't end there. They continued on. When we look at, you know, this example of patience, of courage, and this is only possible through the blood of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is why Imam Hussein al-Islam was chosen for this task, to protect the religion. Because, you know, people think, you know, I was listening to one guy, and of course you got everybody talking about something. You know, he said, no, you know, because there's a poem in Urdu, the scholar, he wrote, and part of the poem that he wrote is that Islam zinda hota hai har Karbala ke baad. That after every Karbala, Islam is given birth, a new life. And so his comment on that was, well, you know, what's the guy talking about? You know, Islam is still there. Rulings were being made, and there was the qadis and the judges, and people were making salat, and the masajid were full, and all of this stuff. Even if what he said there was accurate, which it wasn't. The body has no meaning if the soul is already dead. You know, like a bird cage, it's only useful if you have a bird in it. If the bird dies, the cage has no meaning. So when the soul is dead, then all of these physical things that we do, they have no meaning. You know? So Islam, through this governmental system, was being changed piece by piece. And this is why Imam Hussein al-Islam takes this step. As he's leaving Mecca, and we spoke about this last week, or the week before, you know, many of the companions came to him and they said, you know, please don't go. And we went over why they were saying this. But Abdullah ibn Zubayr and Abdullah ibn Umar, when they came to him, and they said, please don't go, he said, one of the things that he said that my grandfather told me, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told me, that the Kaaba will be desecrated due to a lamb. And I don't want to be that lamb. When we look at it historically, we know that that lamb was Abdullah ibn Zubayr, radiallahu anhu. Because Imam Hussein al-Islam understood that when the heart is devoid of guidance, such a person has no limits as to what he will do. So the desecration of the Kaaba means nothing to such a person. Attacking Medina Munawwara and killing the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, desecrating the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it means nothing to such a person. And then they come out with twisted meanings of verses of the Quran and twisted meanings of the sayings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to justify what they're doing. Even before this, you had already a situation where the Jummah khutbah was being given sitting down. We stand in the khutbah because we know the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But even if we didn't know that, if you read the Quran in Surah Jumu'ah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what in that surah? He says they leave you standing. So that surah itself tells us that the khutbah is given standing up. And you had amongst Banu Umayyah who were giving the Jummah khutbah sitting down. You had Marwan bin Hakam who would give the Eid khutbah before the Salat. And when the companions questioned him about this, he simply said that, if I give it later, people won't listen to me, they'll leave. And they said, well, the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is to give the khutbah, Eid khutbah, after Salat. And he said, well, that was then. This is now. I'm modern. Like today, people, that mindset of, those are backward people. Well, now we know. Same mindset then. You had Jummah khutbahs being given so long that the time of Asr would start. And this, again, these things that I'm telling aren't simply from the books of Sirah or from the books of history. These are things that are mentioned in the Hadith. And the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam could not say anything. They would simply make their salat sitting down, so as to not miss the salat. And when they were asked, they said, if we say something, our heads will be cut off. This is why Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, the hadith is in Sahih Bukhari for two reasons. One of the reasons is this, as to why he makes this statement. And he makes the statement to Marwan. He says, we learn knowledge from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there's one knowledge that I say, Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I say that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said this. And there's another knowledge that if I said this, the people would cut my head off. Imam Hussein al-Islam did not have the luxury of simply hating it in his heart because of his position, because of his connection to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because everybody is looking towards him as the example. So the only way that he can wake the ummah up is to take this step. Like when someone is clinically dead, heart stops beating. What do? You shock them. You start off with 200 joules, and then you bump up to 300, and then you go to 360 joules. But you shock them. And this is exactly what the martyrdom of Imam Hussein al-Islam did to the ummah that believed in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It woke them up. It got that heart beating again. And this is why afterwards you'll see so many revolutions that will come because of what he did. And because of what he did, he truly gave life to Islam again. And this is what that poet is talking about. But when, like I said, when the heart is devoid of iman, of fear of Allah, then there are no limits. And this is why in that battle, on that day, as each one of the family members would ride out and they would be martyred, and he would bring them back and lay them beside the tent. The only one that he buried was Ali Asghar, who was 6 months old. And he did this for a reason. Again, everything has a reason. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders us to ponder. Because he knew what was coming afterwards. After they have martyred everyone, then they go around and they chop everyone's heads off, and they put them up on the spears. Even then, Imam Hussein al-Islam is looking down on everyone. There's a poet, an Arab poet, and the rough translation of what he said was that, he said that, even if the dogs kill the lion and dance on his grave, the dogs are still dogs and the lion is still a lion. So what do? They chop the heads off, put them on the spears, and then they take their horses and run over everyone's body, trample everyone. They're already dead. Of course, we know that they're truly living. They have attained true life. Bal ahya. This is true life. They are more alive than we are alive. But they run their horses to them, in their mind says, oh, they've killed them, they're dead. These are enemies of the state. They run over them with the horses. And Imam Hussein al-Islam knew this was coming, so this is why he buried Ali Asghar, because if they ran over him, there would be nothing left. Of course, news spread very quickly, but before I get to the news spreading, the other question that people ask is, well, if this was such a battle between good and evil, between faith and disbelief, then why weren't all the other companions along with Imam Hussein alayhi salam? Where were they? This is a question that people raise. Where were they? Because they think there's no answer for this either. Because in their minds, again, they're thinking of Imam Hussein al-Islam like anybody else. So whatever he did was just like anybody else. The question to those people is, how come in the Battle of Badr you only have 313 companions? When in Medina Munawwara you had another almost 1,500 companions that could have joined them. Why only 313? Because when they left Medina Munawwara, none of them knew that they were going into the battle. They were all thinking that we're going to go stop a caravan. Sa'd bin Mu'adh radiallahu anhu, right before the battle begins, he says to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, we will have a horse ready for you, so that if things don't go as we wish, then you can go and leave and go to Medina, and there are people there who love you like we love you, and will protect you. But, so why weren't they there? Because they didn't know. Abdullah ibn Amr, when Imam Hussein al-Islam is leaving Makkah, Farazdak, who is, he's considered the best Arab poet, and his history is a little long, so I won't go into that because I don't have time. He's coming in with his mother to make the Hajj, because they're leaving on the 8th of Dhul Hajj. He had a close connection with the father of Imam Hussein al-Islam, Ali radiallahu anhu. Farazdak did. Abdullah ibn Amr, he says to Farazdak, He says, why don't you go with him, because you know that's what you want? He says, because I'm afraid of what they will do to him. And Abdullah ibn Umar, radiallahu anh, he says, this is the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What will they do to him? He couldn't even fathom that someone would do anything to him, much less what actually happened to him. This is why they weren't there. Time's up today. Inshallah, maybe next week we'll get into some of the aftermath, some of the revolutions that rose up after Karbala, inshallah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us and help us and give us the understanding and fill our hearts with His true love and the true love of His beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, his companions, and all of those whom they love, inshallah. Those who have not made sunnah, go and make sunnah.